Recording in progress.
Is there. Yeah.
Hey, Susan.
Any of these players, so I don't know what it is. Mark, can you hear it?
I think it's coming from Raina's background.
Because the only speaker that's moving, well, except for me right now, obviously, is hers.
Raina, is there anybody in your house that's listening to the game?
Through to do it
No.
yet again and take their spot where they deserve to
It
be.
is like totally,
yeah, exactly.
but
Going
it's
cutting back to the
Oh, now I heard something.
Raina, we only hear it when you speak.
not in the room. I'm gonna go find out what's going on downstairs.
Raina, see if you have.
I'm gonna go downstairs and see if it's in my house.
Raina, see if you
Somehow.
have a tab.
But it's really weird because I'm not hearing it in the room.
Disconnected
But, oh my God, I can just mute.
It's probably a tab in her open in her computer.
Oh.
I'm gonna be.
Maybe I should log out and then come back in.
Yeah, the other thing you could check, Raina, is to see if you have a tab
to do.
open in on your computer. That's where it's coming from.
Okay, I'm gonna go downstairs and just see if I've got any games going on.
Susan, Andrea's trying to get into the meeting, Kelly.
And I'm gonna be leaving to go to the PSNT Zoom, but then coming back to this.
All right.
So I'll be gonna catch up on all the network geothermal afterwards. I listened to Cindy Cream's webinar yesterday. It was quite interesting.
Okay.
So looking forward to that.
Thank you, Mark and Cassidy. I'm in.
Oh, okay.
Cassidy just didn't see me waiting to get in for a while. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Audrey. Well, hold on. I'm going to outside and I'm getting started now.
Well, we're happy to see her safe and sound in the finish line. Just kind of trading.
I'm gonna leave. I'm just gonna leave and then I'll come back in. There's nothing on in my house that would make this happen.
Counselor Getz, do you have another window open on your computer? Another tab?
In this right in here?
So do you have another web page open?
No.
Okay.
Well, I think today, if any day is a mid day, it's today
Okay,
a
I'm
mid-day.
just gonna log out and I'll come back in,
So,
okay?
just have a look at that.
Or mute. I'll just mute.
It'll be ding. She had before she got kind of stuck in the.
I guess I. It's 1,000 Commonwealth or 1,000 Walnut? Oh, yeah, 1,000 Commonwealth Avenue is something I'm plus. Okay, and we have one thing in advance of you anyway, so not to worry. That's all right. Okay, see you soon. Bye. Well, she went to Brookline Town Hall. She's on her way now to Newton. Who's this? City Hall, Audrey Schulman. Oh, okay. Maybe she thought she was in Brookline. Yeah, that's what she thought. No, she has another meeting in Brookline. Oh, okay. So are all the counselors here now?
It's Counselor, haven't seen Counselor Davis.
Counselor Kalis is they're taking him out for birthday, so he won't be here. He might join us later. So we all set?
Yeah.
You're recording?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Facilities Committee. And this rain is finally kicking in.
Yeah.
And present at the beginning of the meeting, is my Vice Chair, Allison Leary from Ward 1. Let's see, Counselor Laredo from Ward 7, Counselor Kelly from Ward 3, Counselor Danberg from Ward 6, Counselor Gentile from Ward 4, myself as the chair from Ward 2, and did I miss anybody? I don't think so. We're also joined by Counselor Maliki from Ward 3, and do we have our person from Eversource online? Okay. Okay. So let me read our first item into the record. This meeting, by the way, is being both audio and video recorded. Our first guest is just called from Brookline Town Hall, so she's clearly in the wrong place. She's on her way to Newton. She'll be here soon. Okay, so the first item is 173-24. Eversource Energy petitioning for grant of location to relocate 2 poles on the southwesterly side, approximately 339 and 239 feet southwest of Pearl Street in Jackson Road, Ward 1. And Ms. Callender, you are here from Eversource?
I am. Good evening.
Good evening.
So it is just as you stated, we are seeking a grant location to relocate the 2 poles, 227-10 and 227-11. And it's my understanding that the town, or the city, excuse me, is requesting that we relocate these poles for the new driveway at 150 Jackson Road.
So that was the reason to relocate for a new driveway?
Correct.
Okay.
A new school, the Lincoln Elliott School.
Oh, is that
correct?
That's what I am told. A new school, yes.
okay?
And I guess
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Callender?
I do.
Okay, go
Ms.
ahead.
Calendar, they replacing the poles? They're just moving them? Is that what you're saying?
well, so yes, I mean, when you replace a pole, you're technically removing the old one and putting in a new one. So the poles are moving, but it's a new install and then removing the old poles.
And this is our building commissioner who asked for this, I suppose, right?
Right. It's my understanding it came from the city of Newton.
Yeah, okay. It's very close to, it's in my ward and very close to where I live. I'm familiar with the spot. Makes
Okay.
sense to me. And when ready, I'm happy to move the item.
Okay, So we need to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that's speaking, would like to speak about this particular item? If you are here, if you could raise your hand, which is, it should say raise hand on the bottom of your screen. Or you can, if your picture, no, your picture won't be here, but if you could use the raise hand button, we can promote you to speak. Is there anybody raising their hand? So hearing and seeing none, last chance to speak. We'll close the public hearing. And I think Councilor Leary would like to
May I move approval?
move approval.
Yes.
Is there anything, any other comments on this particular item? Okay, so let's vote. Do we do roll call for this? No. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Abstentions? Okay, so thank you, Ms. Calendar. That has been approved.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. So is our guest, is Mr. Luz here from Framingham yet? Why don't you promote, is he, yeah, promote him. Will he just reverse the order? Is that?
Yeah, that's
illegal? Okay. It takes a second for him to get promoted. Mr. Luz, welcome to Newton. So to speak. Hi.
How are you?
Thank you for being willing to join us tonight. Our guest from Heat went to Brookline Town Hall by mistake, so she's on her way to Newton. So if you don't mind, we'd like to have your item go first. Is that okay with you?
Sure. Yeah, I was looking at the agenda and saw Audrey on there, so I was banking on her great introduction to the generals of network geothermal, but I'm gonna do my best to talk through
All
that.
right, so let me just read your item into the record.
Okay.
It's 179-24. Counselor Albright, on behalf of the Public Facilities Committee, requesting a discussion about the Framingham Network Geothermal Project with Eversource. This discussion should include neighborhood selection, pros and cons of the project learned to date, and costs and feasibility of scaling this project citywide. So, and Mr. Luz, you are the Sustainability Coordinator for Framingham, is that correct?
That's correct.
So, and you are monitoring, or you're taking care of this project from the Framingham side. If you could tell us what's going on, that we would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. So myself as a sustainability coordinator, I actually work in our capital projects department within the city. So I work with Jim Palini, who is the director of that division. So together we've been, the point of contact for the city for most aspects of this project. But yeah, I don't know if it's worth, it sounds like you guys are very familiar with the generals of, network geothermal and kind of the idea of this. So I don't necessarily have to jump into that unless that would be helpful.
Well, I think I think this is all new for the committee. Is this new for the committee? I wasn't on the committee last term, but I think it's new for most of the members of this committee. So it's too bad that Audrey's not here to give us the introduction, but if you could just.
No worries. I'm happy to give like an intro and then maybe jump into like where we're currently at with the project.
Okay, thank you. That would be great.
Of course. So yeah, Framingham was selected as the site for the Eversource networked geothermal pilot project. And basically, in a nutshell, what the system is, if you think about an individual geothermal system, and maybe I'll rewind a bit and say that sometimes when people say geothermal, they can mean a bunch of different things. So there's a type of geothermal where you're going many hundreds of feet underground to, essentially pull enough heat to generate steam, to produce steam to generate electricity. That's one type of geothermal. That's not what this project is about. Essentially, in our project, we have a series of bore fields, which are just, pipes going in the ground about 600 to 700 feet. And they create loops through which water is circulated. You can think of, if you're familiar with a geothermal heating and cooling system for an individual home, The system is sort of like that, with the major differentiating factor that instead of each individual homeowner having their own geothermal system that connects to their building, we're creating this network system where we have distributed bore fields. So for instance, at each site, there could be 30 wells. And then we're connecting all of the buildings together to these geothermal assets. The real benefit is that, individual residents aren't having to, we're not having to distribute each of these assets for each customer individually, or, each resident individually. We can kind of centralize, and there's some efficiencies in that. And then in addition, by having this connected geothermal networked system, it actually improves the overall efficiency of the system, how it operates. So we can, kind of get people, an even cleaner system than, than if they were, just running their own geothermal system. So that's kind of the vision for it. Sorry, I don't have any graphics to pull up, but I can kind of talk through what how our system is laid out. So as I mentioned, we have a series of bore fields installed in a neighborhood in Framingham.
Thank you. A series of, are you saying 4 fields or bore fields? What are you saying?
Sorry, bore fields with a B. So those are the locations where they're drilling into the earth, installing these U-pipe, essentially like just loops that go underground. And what's happening is water is being circulated through these pipes. And in the summer, what's happening is they're taking heat from inside the buildings. Energy is transferred into this water through the pipe system, and it's sent underground. And so that way the heat can be stored underground. You can do the reverse in winter, where underground it's a steady 55 degrees year round. And so believe it or not, that's enough energy to both heat and cool. And so based on that, in the winter, you can actually pull heat from underground and use that to heat, homes, businesses. In our case, we have a couple municipal facilities that are going to be tied in. But sorry, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So yeah, for our project, for our network geothermal system, we have 3 different locations where we have those wells, which are really kind of the core of, providing the heating and cooling capacity for the network in addition to the buildings themselves. I can kind of talk, actually, Audrey will probably be a really great resource to kind of get into that. But so we have a bore field behind our fire station number 5. We have a bore field at what is the Framingham Public Schools Welcome Center. These are both in the parking lots. And then the third bore field for this system is located at the Framingham Housing Authority. And it's actually, part of it is within the right of way. It's kind of at the end of this cul-de-sac. So in itself, that was kind of an interesting thing to bring through, like the permitting process and all that. But together, these provide the kind of the thermal capacity underground for the system. And I'll pause in case there are any questions there, and then just keep going on with a.
Councilor Getz you have a question, but I never said that you were here. So Councilor Getz is here from Ward 5, Councilor at Large. Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. I'm sorry for that weirdness. It was me. It was like a ski competition, a woman's ski competition on the backside. And it was like, where is that? Okay, so you were talking about efficiencies, and I just, in my head, I can probably look this up, but you were talking about how it was better for each, rather than having, a bunch of individual systems, that it was collectively better for the consumer to be tied into it. Could you just it may be too technical, but can you explain a little bit, like, why is that more efficient?
Sure, that's a great question. So I mentioned earlier, the bulk of kind of the thermal energy for to make the system work is coming from those bore fields. But kind of there's another side to that, where because you have a network system, let's say it's the winter and you have a building that year round, you want to keep cool all the time. And a great example of this, we don't have this in our system, but a great example that's commonly referenced is if you have a data center, you have a lot of equipment that's producing a ton of heat. And so you always want to keep that place cool, even in the winter. With a network geothermal system, through the heat pumps, you can actually pull heat from that building and use it in other places where it can be more productive. So for instance, you could send that to, homes that are on the network. And so that's kind of the other side of it being networked. If it wasn't networked, that kind of energy exchange between buildings on the loop, in addition to pulling from the ground, that side of it can't really happen.
Okay,
Um,
so, all right, I understand now. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Council Laredo?
Thank you, Mr. Luz. So a couple of questions. One, how much land do you need to put in one of those geothermal pumps, both for an individual building and if you were going to group it?
Another great question. That one really depends on what the size of like the heating and cooling load is. So, I mean, even if you're just talking about like a single family home, like depending on how large the home is, heating and cooling needs. I mean, even from like a cost perspective, it varies so much between like different systems. I'm trying to think of like in terms of like square footage for our projects. I'd say this, our school's parking lot is, the largest parking lot of the group. And we originally were going to have, there's different types of drilling methods. So the typical one that people are most familiar with is just a straight well that goes down, and then you space those like 20 or so feet from each other. And that's what comprises a bore field of a bunch of different, wells. But in that specific case, we actually went with a different drilling method called deviated drilling. And so instead of going straight down, and then they space the wells out about 20 feet apart, they actually start at one location and make like a circle, and the wells go sideways. And so this doesn't answer your question, but just to say that there are different ways that you can drill that will take up different amounts of space. So if you are space restricted, you may be able to do like a different method to make do with less square footage.
So let's say, for example, you're going to go geothermal for the library, just to pick an example.
Mhm.
What would the cost be of installing a system, and what's the return on investment over, say, 20 years?
Without knowing any details on the building, I can't really give you, and even to be honest with you, I think Eversource would probably be like a better, I know cost figures on the project as like a whole, but not necessarily for like individual building types that they've tied in.
So I'll let you go. I'll just make the observation of my colleagues that this is obviously extremely interesting and, potentially revolutionary. Before we could ever act on any of this stuff, I think we have to have a real clear understanding of how much land we need for anything and what the cost is, both the initial installation cost and then ongoing costs compared to savings we achieve on energy consumption. So I'll just leave it at that. I realize, Mr. Luz, you don't have that now, which is certainly fine. Very much appreciate your giving us this information. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I think some of your questions, Councilor Laredo, are going to be learned through this pilot. I think that's the point of doing the pilot. Mr. Lutz, it might help if you tell us.
Well, I don't think we could do a pilot, Madam Chair, until we have at least some estimate of the cost.
No, I'm not talking about our pilot. I'm talking about the pilot that they're doing. Eversource is doing one in Framingham and National Grid's doing one in Lowell. They're learning a lot from that.
Sure, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Can you tell us how many people are affected by this? How many households, how many square feet of building?
Yeah, so we have 37 buildings that are going to be integrated in the loop. So that's 32 of those are residential buildings. And actually, I believe it's about 80% of the homeowners that were along the route decided they wanted to participate. There's 5 commercial buildings, and I think so in total, it should be about 140. I say customers because it's tied to like the electric bill, how many different electric bills are being paid related to this. So I'm just trying to see if there are any other call outs of like system size I can give you. Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good description. Like I said, we have a couple municipal facilities that are involved. One of them is part of our Welcome Center And then we have our fire station that are included in that too.
Thank you. I see Mr. Mr. Yo, I didn't introduce you either. Mr. Yo is our Chief Operating Officer. And you have a comment or a question?
Oh, thank you very much for calling on me. Mr. Laredo, we are planning on geothermal at both the Countryside and Franklin elementary schools. With the new federal tax benefits, geothermal now is very cost competitive. It does have a longer payback, but even with the tax advantages, but now it really makes a lot of sense to do. So, and in terms of space, your question, I think most of the boreholes that we're going to be putting in are underneath the parking lot of each school. So I think we're going to be able to just use the footprints of the parking lots in order to have the well field underneath that area.
Mr. Yo, are you able to cover the holes with pavement
Yes.
essentially?
Yeah.
And that you don't need access to them to?
I think you need access in certain areas. That's about all I know. I can get you more details. Josh can get you more details at some point.
Don't get me wrong, I think there's excellent.
Yeah.
When you come to us with those projects, will you give us the cost breakdowns, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah, a lot of this.
About the differences, so we can make an informed decision.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of that had been discussed previously when we brought forward Countryside. If I could ask a quick question from a fellow municipality here. We're very interested. We did actually apply to be one of the pilot communities, didn't get it, but we're watching this very carefully. My question as a municipal official really has to do with the relationship with the utility. And I think you're all going to be customers of the utility. They're going to be running and billing people, but they're using your land. There's all sorts of legal interrelationships here. I'm sure there's certain legal agreements. We're fascinated to see how that all transpires and how I think network geothermal could be really the future. And what role does municipality have? We certainly own some land, but then how do we relate to the utility that's going to be running this and billing people? So that's sort of what we're interested in seeing out of this. I know Peter Bear and others from our extended team of energy experts here are very interested in all these legal relationships as well, how to make a system like this work. So I'm sure you won't have all the answers to that, but we can't wait to hear how some of those things get worked out.
So I have another question in the room. Councilor Leary?
Yes, Mr. Les, how was Framingham selected? What was the criteria?
Yeah, so my understanding, I mean, there's a bunch of different criteria that Eversource was looking at. Things like geology. They really wanted they wanted a lot of diversity in the types of heating fuels that currently existed on site. So they wanted a good mix of customers that had oil deliveries, fuel deliveries, natural gas. We have some multifamily properties on the loop that currently have electric resistance heat. So seeing that kind of diversity in customer load, the area that the project is in is also an environmental justice neighborhood, which I think was also part of their criteria in evaluating sites. And then the other part, I think, was community support. And I've heard from a lot of the communities that have been interested in moving this, vying to be selected for that. I think that was pretty strong across. I think one of the things that we're really fortunate to have, and part of how we identified the site from the get-go, we're actually working on a microgrid study for the area. And a lot of the same reasons that it could be a good location for a microgrid, it looked like it was a good potential location for a geothermal network. And so we had a lot of buy-in from the major stakeholders there, including our housing authority, the schools, and things like that.
Great, thank you. And there was no the geology of the area or the physical characteristics of the soil or any of the rock or anything that didn't have anything to do with it?
No, that did, to my understanding. I remember actually And I see Audrey there. Hey, Audrey. I remember from one of the amazing charrettes that Heat had hosted, one of the things we talked about, and we had like breakout groups per community, and we were talking about the mastic rock that Framingham has. It's kind of depth to bedrock. I remember that being a really key highlight of kind of the geology and the specific neighborhood we were in. Believe it or not, I guess, the closer you are to that, the more economical it is. It's harder to drill through dirt than it is to go through rock with the equipment that they use. So we were in good shape.
Did you interrupted yourself and asked us to have, if we had questions. Is there more that you want to tell us about your project?
Oh, sorry, was that directed to me?
Yes. Should I say that again? You were kind enough to stop your presentation and see if there were questions, but did you have more you want to tell us?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just thinking through, I'm trying to remember where I left off on that. I think I was talking about just how the geothermal system worked. I guess, I talked about how many buildings are included. I'll just say that the system is served by a mile of main that's been installed in the street. So it's very similar to natural gas installation. They use actually the same type of pipe, the HDPE pipe, which has a really long lifetime. I'm just trying to think if there are any other major, elements to call out. Oh, so just to highlight on our current status with the project now, as I mentioned, all of the main pipe has been installed in the streets. They're working on the pump house now and hopefully wrapping that up soon. But the next big part of the project it's started, but I think it's really going to get going over the coming weeks is the building conversion work. So all of the, replacing the existing heating systems and then adding this new geothermal equipment. But other than that, I'm happy to speak to kind of other community engagement stuff that's gone on, and field any questions that you all might have.
So maybe what we should do, would it be okay with the committee if we leave this open, this docket item open, and then we hear from Audrey Schulman, and then we can have answers from the two of you. Yours are from the, your on the ground work, and Audrey from her, a different level. Would that be okay with everyone? Okay. Do we have to do anything parliamentary to lay that on the table? Okay, all right, so let's open the other item, the first item, and Audrey, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Sorry for the confusion.
My spazziness.
Let me just read it into the record. 147-24, Councilor Albright on behalf of the Public Facilities Committee, requesting a discussion with Audrey Schulman from HEAT regarding network geothermal energy to include references to this program in the final GSEP report and GE's, I don't know why it says GE's, but geothermal's role in converting to renewable energy. So and then I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay, I have a presentation, can't throw it up there, so.
Well, if you log into the Zoom, you can put it up there. You have the agenda, you could, the link is on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got the agenda, so I don't know that I can, but I'll just verbally go through what it,
Do you want to just send her the agenda again?
Yeah.
If we can send it to you, and then all you have to do is click on it and you can join in. While you're doing that, Mr. Luz, I have a question for you. Is any of this costing this Framingham any money, or is it all on the grant?
It's all through the pilot. So all of the infrastructure, building conversion work, obviously that's a really important aspect of the project for us. So, and I think it also a reason for a lot of the, initial success. I think people are really excited about it, but, also that's a huge, motivator too.
So when you selected a neighborhood for this project, what kinds of questions did people have for you about, what their costs would be, how it would change their lives, and how did that all go?
I think So the first weekend that Eversource did to really to start off after the location was identified as like a good potential area, Eversource launched a kind of engagement process where they did, door-to-door canvassing to get people, to kind of see what the interest was and figure out specifically like where in this larger neighborhood they would want the loop to run through. I know on the first weekend that they did that canvassing, they had 40 residents sign letters of interest saying that they wanted this for their property. And then in fact, I remember hearing too that some of the people on the, like in that larger neighborhood area were asking Eversource for yard signs so they could convince their neighbors. So, that they could get the loop to run through their street. So there was a lot of community interest in this. I think, yeah, I guess just to leave it there, I think it was really positive from the beginning. I think now people have a lot of questions on, we recently had a meeting just on like a general community meeting in that neighborhood. And there were a lot of questions on the geothermal project. Some surprising that I hadn't heard before, kind of like on environmental impacts compared to like other heating system types. Thankfully, we were able to answer them. And whenever we have kind of that stuff come up, if you go on Eversource's geothermal website, they have this exhaustive FAQ that has pretty much anything that's come up during the process.
Okay, good. So I see we've been joined by Ann Berwick, who is our sustainability co-director. And yeah, so I think, are you in now?
I think I am. Let me try sharing screen.
I'll just say Mr. Loves, thank you I've been here all along. I don't know why I wasn't showing up, but I really appreciated your presentation. It was very interesting and informative.
Thank you.
So sorry for the long difficulty. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing, yes, I can see who you are, slideshow. HEAT's a nonprofit. We don't take funding from, gas or geo or any industry so that we can maintain trust with everybody. We work through network leadership, so we work with everybody. It's an image of one of the shreds we had where we have somebody who did who you all might know, did a 30-day hunger strike against.
Yes, I recognize him.
Gas peaker plant. We got the Steelworkers Union. We got the gas utility executives, and gas is the clean bridge fuel, phrase originator, all at the same meeting, no fisticuffs, which is sort of cool. So 2 summers ago, my local utility came down my street and ripped up all the gas mains and replaced them with new gas mains. And these new gas mains are going to last, about 100 years, and they're going to be paid off probably over the next 50 years. Meaning that my kids, my grandkids are going to have to be paid for these new gas mains, even though we have a net zero emissions mandate of 2050. So that means that my kids and my grandkids are probably going to have to pay for them, and they won't necessarily be able to use them legally. This is happening across the country ever since the San Bruno explosion in 2012, I think. Gas utilities have been putting a lot of money into new infrastructure. And that's sort of crazy because meanwhile, heat pumps have become way more, they're more popular now than gas furnaces. So what we have is like gas utilities putting an enormous amount of money into an industry that will be failing. And that there are, a lot of net zero emissions mandates across the country is also a big problem. And so what this means in terms of equity is that as customer after customer defects off the system, moving to electric heat pumps, the gas system hasn't gotten any smaller, right? Hasn't gotten any less expensive. So what you have is the remaining gas customers are paying more and more, they're shouldering more and more of the costs of the fixed system. So their energy bills are going higher and higher. At some point, there's gonna be an inflection point hit where gas will become more expensive than heating with air source heat pumps. And at that point, everybody who can is gonna get off the gas system. So the only people left will be the low income and renters. And the Germans call this the last grandma problem, right? Where they imagine one last low income grandma left on the entire gas system, trying to pay for the entire system. She's not gonna be able to afford many gas workers, right? So the system's also not gonna be that safe. So what we have is an unjust and unsafe transition that's, you know, just sort of barreling towards us. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So back in 2017, he came up with the idea, you know, to avoid this situation of gas utilities moving towards installing network ground source heat pumps in the street instead of installing, you know, more gas infrastructure. It's, you know, shallow boreholes, meaning just a few hundred feet deep, as probably as Sean has already explained. The water in the system's ambient temperature, right? It's like, you know, between 40 and 90 degrees. It's not hot, it's not cold, it's just, you know, sort of lukewarm, not even lukewarm. It's a single pipe. And but by the gas, you know, it's perfect for the gas utilities because they're used to installing pipes in the street, they're used to pumping thermal energy through the ground. They have the customers, they have the financing to socialize the cost across everyone and over decades so that it's equitable. And they're running out of options and they're facing existential debt. So this is an option that they can be quite interested in. The system is more efficient than any other heating system known. And that's because imagine that that is an office building, pulling a little bit more cooling than any other building on the street off because of all the computers inside of the building that are constantly humming. So it's gonna return the water into the system a little hotter. And that means that other homes down the street can use that heat. So it passes waste energy from one building to the next. Secondly, you can even store thermal energy in the ground until you need it when, you know, so you can store, for instance, heat in the ground in the summer until you need it in the winter. And if the gas utilities do this, then they can, you know, move entire streets to, you know, decarbonize, you know, heating and cooling at a time. So we're moving from a building by building transition to whole streets at a time. And if they keep those, all those customers in the same customer base, the same rate base, then you don't ever have that last grandma problem, right? Because you're maintaining the balance, the ratio of customers to infrastructure. So you don't have fewer and fewer customers paying for more and more infrastructure. So the outcomes would be it's safer, right? We all went through that horrible Merrimack Valley gas disaster. That would not happen because there's only water in the pipes, it's non-explosive. It would be more affordable even than gas, according to the predictions that we've gotten, and there's been a variety of them at this point. This is the Applied Economics Clinic brief. And of course, they're not regulators, we're gonna have to wait until the regulators decide. But every prediction we've seen is that the cost will be lower. The price likely of electricity will even be lower than it would be otherwise. And that's because as we all move to air source heat pumps and other methods of electricity, that's gonna raise our electric peaks, and our electric peaks are the most expensive part of our electricity, right, per kilowatt hour. And so the higher those peaks go, the more electricity costs. Networked geothermal is twice as efficient as air source heat pump. And so if you care about this graph, it's showing the season, you know, going from January to December, it's showing our current electric peaks at the bottom that are all colored in, solid colors. And the lines above are the lines showing our potential future electric peaks. If we all went to electric baseboard at the top, which is, you know, the least efficient method of doing electric heating. And so it looks sort of like a falcon flying right at you. You know, in terms of the silhouette, the wings raised. And so the air source heat pumps the next one down, it's much more efficient. The Falcon's beginning to land. And then lower, you get ground source heat pumps because that's more efficient than air source because of pulling the temperature from the ground. And then networked geothermal because of the methods, the reasons I mentioned before of the energy waste sharing and the thermal storage. It's even more efficient than that. So that will radically lower our electric peaks and thus lower our future electricity bills. I can go into that one. And, you know, if you ever want to talk about electricity bills, I can talk about that. But it's also extremely reliable. There are installations all over this continent that have been around for a long period of time. All the technology is off the shelf technology. It's you know, it's not new. It's just the idea of gas utilities installing it. It's different. So this is an install that's in Toronto. There's another one, you know, in Austin, Texas, and Whisper Valley. They're all over the place. And what's lovely about it is the workforce, the gas workforce can transition because it's the exact same pipes as Sean said earlier. I've heard a story that the gas workers normally sign their pipes to you know, so if there's any problem with it, everybody knows who installed that pipe. And so they did that with the geo pipes in Framingham. And when the geo, you know, guys saw that, they were like, oh my God, we've never done that. This is even better than we do. It's so similar that they're using the same techniques, you know, and just improving on them. And so also there's lower emissions. So in comparison, using our you know, the only emissions from our electric fuel grid mix, right? So given the fuel grid mix of a few years ago, 2019, from ISO New England, Burrow Happold Engineering calculated that they would be 60% less in comparison to gas. So any building that moved from gas to this system, such as in Framingham, would reduce its emissions 60%. And as our fuel grid, our fuel mix for the electric grid goes down, you know, moves to more renewables, those emissions will decline further. So, you know, Sean's already talked about the Framingham install. National Grid's got 2 other sites selected. In their case, what they're going to be doing is actually taking all the gas appliances with the customer's permission out of the buildings and replacing them with electric appliances. So this will be a gas utility actually doing full electrification, which is sort of incredibly cool. We have a research team with 2 national labs and a whole bunch of others in it, who will be creating, you know, doing an open database, normalized data. We always believe in trust, right? We believe in everybody doing their due diligence. So by having an open database, everybody can sort of check the information and can learn from it as quickly as possible. Because if we're going to take on climate change, you're going to have to go forward fast. We need everybody's brain on. There'll be best practices, an optimization tool. It's called like a digital twin. So that learns over time. So basically they create the version of the Framingham, they create a digital twin of the Framingham install, and then they true it up with the data as it comes in, and then they true it up against the National Grid installs, etc. And it learns as it goes forward. So that each install becomes better and better and cheaper to install and functions more efficiently. We'll also be looking at the environmental impacts to be able to learn how and where to scale. And our hope is that if all of this is done well, and if it turns out as well as, you know, I certainly hope it does, that in the end, if anybody comes down your street to rip up the gas infrastructure in the future, that it will be to install, you know, a non-emitting thermal infrastructure to like networked geothermal to deliver heating and cooling that's safer, more affordable, and that your kids and your grandkids might have to pay for, but they can actually legally use. And that's the end of it. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe you've come up with 1 or 2 from before. So
Yeah, so I got a couple of questions from Ann Berwick and Bill Ferguson. You have them in front of you because I didn't open it, but I can, and I will. They had to do with the legality and the relationship of the you know, the municipality, the rules and how they all works with is your assumption that National Grid and Eversource will take these on in the future and they'll provide network geothermal instead of gas?
from the latest 20 order the latest Department of Public Utilities order on the future of gas proceeding. They seem really positive about the idea of utilities, gas utilities taking on networked geothermal. But everybody's waiting for the data to find out how it, how well it performs. And so until that happens, we will not know for sure. But it seems like it's being, it looked on very, very favorably. But even if regulated utilities did do that, then there's nothing currently saying that municipalities cannot install geo or anybody else, right? So it is not a regulated utility at the moment. And even if National Grid, got, was allowed to do it big scale, any pre-existing install would would of course have to be figured out, right? And one thing I would believe in is that there should be and could be a thermal marketplace. So the networked geothermal is mandated now in New York that each of the gas utilities, each of the major utilities, gas and electric, have to install it. Between 1 and 5 installations. And so Troy, New York is doing it, and they are partnering with National Grid there, where they have the boreholes. It's in a parking lot. And they sell the thermal energy to National Grid, and National Grid owns the infrastructure in the street and services the customers.
So the boreholes were created by the city?
Yes, they did. They had an LLC, I believe, install, and it's a complicated relationship that works legally. But the city gets ongoing revenue and decarbonizes a lot of the big buildings in town. They get everybody gets more affordable heating and cooling costs. And National Grid takes over the operations and maintenance services for customers. And so you could always talk to them and see how they did it. But my hope is that that thermal marketplace idea is available in the future. And so if the city did, if Newton did this, I would suggest simply that it would be, the installation be stubbed out in an area where, in the direction where National Grid or whoever might interconnect it. Because then you have the potential of ongoing income.
I think there was a question here about DPU and its relationship to all of this.
The Department of Public Utilities is not yet regulating this. It's not, aside from allowing the gas utilities to install these first 2 demonstration installations, and being very interested in the results. So they are not yet regulating it. And I think, as I understand it, the only way that, it's like Vicinity is a district energy company that is unregulated. It's quite large. It's, covers a lot of Boston, a lot of the big buildings in Boston, a lot of the buildings in Cambridge, and it's not regulated, right? So I think you can still have district energy systems such as with networked geothermal. As I understand it, Anne might know way better.
Yeah, Executive Berwick, you have, I don't know if I did justice to your question, then you have others. You want to?
Actually, I had a separate question and 2 comments quickly. First comment, Audrey. Oh, well, nice to see you, Audrey, first of all. Audrey, I hope the gas utilities appreciate that you have thrown them a lifeline. And second comment, just you and your colleagues really saw the future well before the rest of us. So thank you for that. And on the regulation piece, which I don't really know the answer to, I would say if the gas utilities are given authority, which I'm guessing would have to be statutory, to be thermal, not just gas companies, then I would think that the DPU could and would regulate them. I guess it would depend on the statutory construct, really. But we do know from the DPU's December 2080 order that the DPU is very enthusiastic about network geothermal and also sees it as the future. But here's my question. So so ISO New England has said recently that okay, we all know we're going to become a winter peaking region. And their concern about that is with increasing amounts of intermittent power from solar and mostly offshore wind, that we're going to be increasingly reliant on batteries, and that batteries do less well in the winter than they do in the summer. We all know that if we drive an electric car or electric bike, right? Batteries degrade more quickly in cold weather. So my question to you is, can you comment on the role of network geothermal in light of that concern? That is, being a winter peaking region with degrading battery capacity.
Yeah, so a variety of things. First off, networked geothermal is the most efficient method, as I said, of delivering heating. So it would radically reduce that winter peaking. And if you look at the electric sector modernization plans, the ESMPs that are at the department now, for instance, I think Eversource and National Grid both say that the greatest amount of that future winter peaking is, of course, from building heating needs.
Yeah.
And so that networked geothermal will radically reduce that electric peak. Secondly, it can shave that peak even further because that water, all the water and all the pipes would basically be a large thermal storage, right? You can before the you can pump heat into the bedrock also. And the bedrock is, of course, dirt cheap. So you have all the bedrock to store temperature in, and there's a variety of really interesting papers like Scarfagan et al. that talk about how much temperature you can pull out once you put it in. And but also just the water in the pipes is a huge thermal battery. And so all of that means that we can, in the shoulder months, summer months, put the heat in the ground and in the water, and then pull it out in the winter as we need it. And that would be so much cheaper and easier than putting in a lot of substations. And my hope is actually that the electric utilities will figure this out and will start to pay for customer retrofits so that they're free for any buildings who want to interconnect to the system. And that way speed up the transition, because it's way easier to do that than again to site the substations.
So you probably are already talking to Gordon Van Welly at ISO New England, but if not, I encourage, no, you're not. Okay, well, what you just said addresses a lot of his concerns.
Yeah,
Or those concerns.
I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah. I'm happy to introduce you.
Councillor Danberg.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, Audrey and Sean, for these great presentations. I think we've all learned a tremendous amount and are very interested in the future of ground source heating. The question that I have is in regard to the air source heat pumps and all of the people who are now moving to air source heat pumps, including my own family. We've spent a considerable amount of money to do that. And I would like to know what people who have moved to air source heat pumps should be looking at doing, and what would the cost be, and will they lose their investment in their air source heat pumps in order to move to ground source heat pumps in the future? What is going to happen to all of the people who are now using or will are moving toward air source heat pumps?
It's a great question. So luckily, by converting to air source heat pumps, you've done a lot of the work necessary to convert to ground source heat pumps. And air source heat pumps have a lifespan on average in this area at about, I think it's 12 years. So hopefully within the next 12 years, you know, someone will come down your street, install, you know, ground source network geo. And we'll be able to, if you have a central HVAC, just pull out that central heat pump and replace it with a ground source heat pump and interconnect you. You've already done the electrical upgrade, you've already done the installation, you've done everything else you need.
So the answer to my question is that people should wait out the lifespan of their air source heat pump, and then expect that ground source would come down their street?
You know, yes, and my hope is that the utilities will begin to figure out that they have to be proactive. And there are now multi-source heat pumps that exist. So my hope is that the electric utilities, for instance, here's my dream. They'll go down this, you know, they'll say like, I'm gonna pay for every customer retrofit in order to stop that substation that's needed that I can't possibly get an okay on because nobody will allow me to install it. So I'm gonna pay for every customer retrofit. I'm gonna put on multi-source heat pumps for everybody at end of life of their mechanical. So they start like a decade before the gas utility installs the networked geo. And then once the gas utility installs the networked geo, the outside compressor, which would have been connected in order to allow that multi-source heat pump to get temperature off the air, would be taken away, and the house or building, you know, business would be connected into the networked geo. And that outside compressor could then be used on the next street. That's my dream imagining. If you caught all of that, but I hope that we begin to think way ahead and have a plan in place that's street segment based and phased with a lot of thoughtful financing so that we can start doing this lickety split and in an efficient way that reduces everybody's disruptions and cost.
Okay, I think I caught a lot of that.
Okay.
Not all of it. But thank you very much for your thoughts on that. And I think we've got some work to do before we get to a point where we can make this work.
And this woman has been a visionary for many years, I just want to add.
Councilor Leary. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So yes, Audrey, you've always been a visionary. I have a couple, it's like, it's such a huge change. I don't even realize that there's questions that I want to ask, but I'm not sure what they all are yet. But I was thinking as you're talking about network geothermal and the efficiencies, that it would work great in denser communities and cities, but maybe not so much in rural areas. And is there any idea, would that just be people would have their own geothermal and have to dig their own wells, so to speak? So maybe it would cost more. And but of course, your priority would be to do it in areas where you can get more people off gas and fossil fuels. Do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, so the denser urban areas is of course where you can harvest the most amount of energy per linear foot of install. And so that's the best, and that's where you have the most balanced heating and cooling use, right? So you have the maximum amount of energy sharing, you know, moving waste energy to the next building.
Right.
So all of that is.
About economy scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
And basically, so far as we can figure out, anywhere where you currently have gas is about the right area for networked geo, because the buildings are close enough that it's economically worthwhile to do. And I hope that potentially even areas that do not currently have gas, like, you know, rural main streets, might also be applicable, because you don't have to bring in any transmission. You don't have to bring a gas pipe in. You just have to do like a loop of water going up and down the main street. And so it might be that there's even more customers that can be served in this way, but we're gonna find out as this moves forward.
Okay, and what about, I know we're also working on towards much more efficient buildings when we build them.
Yep.
And when we do renovations, we're also, and it's one of the 10 communities as well. So I would imagine that would put us in a better position also to move to more successfully move, more efficiently move to network geothermal.
Yes, each building would take less energy.
Right.
You know, and so the pipes could be smaller, the infrastructure smaller, et cetera.
So do you foresee people having either very, very low utility bills or even no utility bills at all? Which is actually happening now. And some people who are going on electric or have solar, you know, that they're able to put back in the system.
Yes, they would have to, I could imagine, for instance, you know, somebody who had some boreholes on their property could then become, you know, as part of the thermal marketplace, could erase any energy use they might have. But it would always be every building, even passive house, does use some energy, so you have to have some energy production on site in order to offset that.
Okay.
So it could be boreholes or whatever.
And just my final question regarding National Grid, who until recently was going to be using their gas pipes for methane and hydrogen and green methane. Are they coming around now to realizing that there's another opportunity here for them to use the infrastructure and their workers to move on geothermal, or are there still resistance there?
So every gas utility is a large company, and I can't make statements about the entire organization, especially one which is an international company. There are still large portions of National Grid that believe deeply in hydrogen and in methane being natural gas being used far into the future. And I think they're beginning to see more and more promise in the networked geothermal option. And so I believe that there's probably large fights inside of every utility as this moves forward, but more and more of the utilities are extraordinarily supportive of it. There's a coalition of over 20 gas utilities that are meeting regularly to look at networked geothermal. That represent over 50% of all the gas customers in the country.
Seems to me to be one of those kind of monumental changes that we've seen over time, like when we moved from horse and buggy to automobiles and when there was no internet, and that changed everything.
Yeah. I remember NPR just talking about the internet again and again for like a solid year with me thinking, oh, whatever. It won't be anything.
Yeah. Yep, and we all have iPhone, smartphones now.
Yep.
Are you all set?
I'm all set. Thank you very much.
So when Sean did his presentation, he talked about all the borehole wells being on public lots, parking lots. So can they be in private parking lots or?
It's up to the, if somebody is willing to, lease out their land, like Troy is, then yes. It could be, if I were adjacent to the thing and had a parking lot, I would be thrilled, right? It would be an ongoing revenue stream and it would be invisible to me. My parking lot would be ripped up, probably repaved more beautifully than before. And I would have money for the next 100 years. That would be nice.
So we have there are 3 projects being heard right now by the Zoning Board of Appeals, 3 housing projects, and they're all gonna have parking lots.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, should somebody be talking to them and the utilities about the future of the boreholes could be in those parking lots?
Yeah. Then maybe, like houses are now, sometimes made solar ready. Maybe it's made geothermal ready. And you put the boreholes in ahead of time. And, you can get ongoing revenue stream whenever they become interconnected.
I think we need to think about how to integrate that issue into our studies of the projects as they come in front of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anybody else have any questions? I mean, I think we have a lot of questions, but I think there's a lot to absorb.
A lot of info.
And so anybody else want to ask Sean or Audrey a question tonight? I think we're for the moment, we're overloaded. When do you think we'll have data from, Sean, do you know when you're gonna have data from your project about the costs? And the heating costs for your customers there?
Great question. So we're hoping that the pilot is going to wrap up construction late summer, or I would say probably like late June. So Eversource is going to run the pilot for a period of 2 years, and that's when they're going to collect their data. And then after that 2 years, then there's going to be decisions made on the pilot. I will say for the duration of the pilot, they have already determined what rates residents and different participants are going to be charged as part of the pilot. And then they'll, based on the data they collect, then they'll look at, changing those rates based on that. But yeah, I would say 2 years. And even over the course of that, actually, Audrey might be able to share too about some of the data that you guys will be collecting from the wells directly. And so there'll be all sorts of thermal energy data that will be collected, data from customers. Eversource is also going to be collecting feedback over the course of the pilot and probably sharing that out to the DPU as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you both. Councilor Danberg, you have another question?
Yes, just quickly, thank you very much for the additional information. In pondering the idea of AirSource customers and how they might in the future benefit from moving to ground source, Audrey, I think you mentioned, if I understood correctly, that the AirSource customers had already done some of the work toward ground source, toward moving to ground source. What is that what is that work that would help toward ground source, and how would that help with the cost of moving from air source to ground source?
So if a customer already has air source and say they have every building's different, right? But if somebody has a central, forced hot air system with air source attached to it, then you have an outside compressor and you have the inside mechanical connected to your ducts, right? And so all you have to do is take out that mechanical and that air, the inside heat pump, and replace it with the ground source heat pump, and then just, connect the water. And there'd also be probably, then you'd have the connection in the street, there'd be a service loop going to the building, and a heat exchanger in the front of the building. It would be basically like putting in a gas connection, except for it just has water in it, as well as changing out your mechanical. Did that somewhat make sense?
Yes, it does. And that certainly helps to know that the ductwork is serviceable for both. The air source heat pump unit itself would not, however, serve it all, and would not be useful in the ground source. Is that correct?
I believe you'd be going from a water to air source heat pump. You currently have an air to air source heat pump, meaning it's taking temperature from the air and it's going, forced hot air into the house. And so you have to take that heat pump out and replace it instead with a water to air source heat pump, as it's called, which means it's temperature off the water pipes that are coming to the building and get through the the forced hot air system.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think it's terrific that both of you, Sean and Audrey, that you are willing to be here and educate us tonight. What would you guys like to do as a committee? Should we hold these and they end them? I mean, there may be more questions coming, but we don't have to have a docket item to ask questions.
I will move to hold because I would like to hear more at some point down the road on this without having to redocket the item.
So you want to hold both of these items, Counselor Danberg?
I would do that, yes.
Okay, so you're on the hook to come back someday. If you're willing. Counselor Danberg has moved hold to both 147-24 and 179-24. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions? So thank you so much. So we're going to talk about now the gas pipes database of Peter Bears, and he might say a word about Green Newton's grant on geothermal from heat as well. So if you're welcome to stay if you like.
Oh, yeah, so for a little bit and then.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. So let me just introduce that docket item. Actually, there's two docket items that I'm gonna open up. One is 148-24. A discussion and presentation from the Newton Gas Pipes team to show the Public Facilities Committee the database built on data from National Grid data. This graphic representation maps various data regarding leaks, reductions of leaks over time, proximity of leaks to trees, and other important factors. And the other one is 39-24, Councilors Laredo, Albright, and Leary, requesting a discussion with the administration sustainability team and the Department of Public Works on a plan to more effectively reduce methane gas leaks in the city, how best to coordinate National Grid regarding transition away from methane gas and electric heating solutions. So we're not expecting much of a discussion with the Department of Public Utilities or our sustainability team tonight. This is really just an educational night for us all. So Peter, you're on.
Thank you. Peter Barrer, I'm at 60 Endicott Street, Newton Highlands. And I've been organizing the Newton Gas Pipes team, which is a loose group of volunteers from ages late teens in high school through grandparents and education levels, the high school students through PhDs. Why are we doing this? It's because the transition off fossil fuel is important for safety, health, and the climate. I don't have to go into any more detail. And it's very important for our city. But the transition is very complex. Anybody who begins to look at this sees how complex it is. And it's particularly complex regarding gas. And the network geothermal is one potential route, which might work. And I hope it does. But it's the whole thing is complex. I am not Newton's Commissioner for Gas System Transition and Retirement. Nobody is, which is a big part of the problem. Newton, as a city, has very little authority to do much about it. Most of the authority is at the state level. But I'm hopeful that the current state level officials and the proposed legislation that's being considered will move it forward and give us all more ability to manage a transition. In spite of that, I asked, if I were the Commission of Gas System Retirement, what information would we need to know to do the job effectively? And it turns out there's a lot of information already public, but it's scattered in a lot of different places and very hard to use. So we are compiling the information we can get into a single database and making the information available on our website. We're already finding that the compiled information is useful, and we're finding that there is at least one place where the city can act. So I'm going to share my screen to show you what it looks like. Okay, so this is the landing page of the Ratepayer Gas Pipe Information Center. Down at the bottom lists our information sources, and I'm not going to read all of them, but they include grants of location requests, GSEP plans that are filed annually, reconciliation reports that are filed annually on what the gas system actually installed, annual quality service reports, quarterly leak reports that are filed by National Grid. We also have collected information if you walk the streets, you can see the yellow DigSafe markings, and we're recording what we can learn about the gas pipes from those. And also we've brought in, thanks to Mark Welsh, the city of Newton street tree locations. So I'm going to start just quickly, and stop me at any time if there's any questions, but I'm just going to very quickly take you through it. So the top link here is the link for the 50 largest gas leaks in Newton. And this gets updated quarterly as Grid publishes its quarterly leak report. And there are 515 leaks in Newton. And this is just the 50 largest ones. And there's a lot of information that we've got the address, and it's alphabetized by street name, so it's easy to find something. This is a leak extent, which is a method of which he really helped develop, of measuring how much the leak is. And then there's the leak ID, which I'll show you a little later, but that's National Grid's leak ID, and it's a thread that we carry throughout the database. So, and we can do this for other municipalities too, but for Newton, this is the 50 largest leaks. So I'm just going to jump through here. That's that link. Another way you can access the database is if you want information on a particular street. So this is the list of all the streets in Newton. I'm going to go to Walnut Street because it's got a lot to show. So I can pick Walnut Street and I can put in the addresses that I'm interested in. Let's say 500 Walnut to 1500. And pull the records out of the database. So in that range of Walnut Street, these are all the unrepaired leaks that are currently leaking. And a little bit below here is the information that we've been able to gather from the various sources on the gas pipes that are in there. You know, what the material is, the size, you know, and you can see where there's cast iron or bare steel. Here's a plastic 2-inch installed. And we brought in the crossing streets because but it's all closely crossing, you know, Walnut Street. We also have the grants of location that have been issued. This is the GSEP plans, the plans that National Grid plans to install on Walnut Street going ahead 5 years. So I'm just going to keep on jumping through here. So and we can do that for any street in the city. Now here's the map. This is the map of Newton. It's showing all the current gas leaks, that are currently leaking. The red dots is a gas leak. A red dot with a black halo around it is a significant environmental leak. So those are the ones that are leaking the worst. Okay, and there are a lot of layers into this map. You can zoom in and read the street names, and you can click on any leak number and any leak and get the information, and I'll show that in a minute. I'm going to show what these are the, let's see. These are the plans that National Grid has, the light blue and the darker blue, future plans for replacing pipes in Newton. And you can see there, you know, in some cases they coincide with a leak. In other places, has very little to do with the leak. They have other reasons why they're replacing pipes. I can also, let's see. And these are the places where they've already installed new plastic pipes. And there's some interesting information. Here's this spot here. Let's see, that's on, it's Whittier Road. There's a new pipe and there's a leak on it.
I know that spot well. They were there for 3 years in front of my house. At Commonwealth Avenue.
Yeah.
Hey, Peter, can I just say, as somebody who loves maps and has done a lot of this, this is beautiful.
Thank you. Well, we were inspired by Heat's work. And
It jumped like 3 steps forward.
thank you. Thank you. So here's another leak down here that They installed, let's see if I can click on it right. So there's a leak. It's a grade 3 leak, 1,000 square feet. That's a pretty big leak. And it's at 7 Curtis Street, which is right where 3 Curtis Street, where they replaced 100 feet of pipe. So even where they're spending money to replace pipes, we're still finding leaks. Okay, so I'll take off the pipes. Here's the history of grants of location. And you can see some of them do correspond to where the leaks are and some don't. It's you can click on any particular grant of location and get the story on it. So this one was requested in January of last year, 1,000 feet of new 6-inch pipe. Okay, I'll take the grants of location off. I'm going to put the trees up. So using Mark Welsh's trees database, these are the street trees that are whose roots are in the zone of the leak. So this is not all the street trees, just the street trees that are currently next to leaks that are currently leaking. And an interesting view is if I take off the leaks, now you're looking at all the trees in Newton, or Garden City, that are at risk because of a nearby gas leak. We'll take those off. And I'll put the leaks back in. All right, I want to show you one particular leak that has gotten our attention. It's this leak here on Sawmill Brook. And you can see it's a significant environmental leak with the black halo. And I'm going to put the trees up. You see there are 3 trees that are whose roots are in the zone of that leak. Well, I don't have, but you can click on the here. This one is this is the small Japanese lilac. The other 2 are Norway maples. This is a large one, 18-inch. This is a 14-inch in fair condition. And of course, you don't know if the tree is actually affected by the leak. It's at risk, but a fair condition might be saying something. Anyway, what's interesting about this leak is, so this is the information on the leak. It was first noticed in 2019. Its current leak extent is over 2,000, so it's a significant leak. I can click on the leak and get a history. So this is the history of that leak on Sawmill Brook. And what this one is an example, and we're finding, well, I have to explain it. So it was first measured in September of 2019 as 2,700 square feet. That's a significant environmental leak. And the gas company is regulated to fix all of those within 2 or 3 years to put the rules in effect. But at the end of December last year, it was still leaking. It's still at 2,400 square feet. So the 3 years past 2019 would have been in 2022. It's still leaking. As far as I can tell, this is a violation of what they are regulated to required to do. And we're assembling data to see how it happens a few times in Newton, as much as 100 times throughout National Grid. And we're pulling together a document to, make sure we have everything right there. So I don't know. I just wanted to show this because it's another way that we're finding is useful for this. And
Peter, you want questions as we go along?
Yeah, sure, I can answer questions.
Counselor Rado, and then Audrey has a question.
Just a quick question, Mr. Barra. I see that in 2021, it went up to 4,200 square feet.
That's
But
right.
then right after that, it dropped to 400 square feet and then went back up to 2,400. Can you just explain that?
Yes, leaks vary. Varies by if a truck rolls over it, it might get bigger. The temperature might change if the ground changes. And this is very common for the leaks to go up and down, up and down.
Well, except that it says it was 4,200 for during the winter and early spring of 2022. Then it dropped to 400 for a full year, and then it
Well,
went back up to 2,400.
It's a little deceptive. There was only one measurement. That was in June of 2022. They're only required to measure them once a year. So you're looking at 4 quarters, but there was only actually one measurement.
And I'll just add that the.
I still don't understand why it would go from 2,400 to 4,200 to 400 to 2,400. Forgive me, I just don't understand it.
I don't think I can answer that. And it would Audrey's got an answer perhaps.
So the regulation around significant environmental impact leaks, I think was only started in 2018 or 2019. And so the utilities took, it took a while to train people. There was some inconsistencies around how they did measurements, et cetera. So it might have been that 400 square feet was somebody simply mismeasuring or misunderstanding or any of the other measurements. It's only lately that Heat goes out and does independent verification of a random selection of the significant environmental impact leaks to make sure that the utilities are enacting this well. And they've been, getting better over time. So that's good. I can't talk about this leak in specific. And I was just gonna say sort of that some of this, that one part of this leak has lasted so long might be because it's under the Sawmill Parkway. That one of the stipulations of the regulation was that if the pipe is very inaccessible and hard to get to, such as on large roads or under subway, train tracks or something like that, then they can have, I believe it's up to 5 years to repair the leak. And you can check the regulation to make sure that I have it right. That's out of my memory.
Okay, thank you.
There's another raised hand. I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is either. Who's got their hand raised? It's a member of the public. So I think we need to keep plowing through, and perhaps at the end,
Okay.
if we have time, we can get to the public.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going through. This is, that's our link, gaspipes.org. Anybody can pick it up on the web, and the Newton Gas Pipes team. I'm going to display a history of Newton's leaks. There, okay. This is a history of, if you add up all of the leak extent of all the leaks in Newton every quarter, which we can now do from the database, this is the history since March of 2020. And just kind of at the top is 2020, down at the bottom is the most recent December 23. Whoops, that's a mistake. I didn't want to go there yet. New slideshow. I'm sorry. Okay. First observation is the number of unrepaired leaks has been dropping significantly. 860 in 2020, down to 515 now. And also the leak extent has also been significantly reduced, which is terrific. This is what we kind of think we want to see. Went from 800 back then down to 300,000 square feet. That's a lot of tennis courts. It's a big area, but it's a significant improvement. I've highlighted spring of last year, because there was such, the third column is how much the leak extent was reduced in that quarter. And it jumped around for a while, but beginning in 2022, it was ranging, most of them were like 9% reductions. This was a bad quarter, 9%, 9%, 9% here, 2% here, 9%. But last winter, there was a very significant improvement, 23% reduction, and a reduction number, 27 large leaks were eliminated. This is a real achievement. Now I can go to the next slide. And I think we can thank Mayor Fuller for this. This is a quote from her update a year ago. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but she said that we've requested National Grid prioritize the work by leak volume and keep fixing them. We got the result. So I think that's a sign of what might be possible. Now, in this slide, I've reproduced the last several quarters, still keeping highlighted that terrific quarter. But I'm comparing it to other benchmarks. For example, here's Boston, which has a much larger square miles than Newton, many more pipes, many more residents. In comparison to our 515, they have 851 leaks. And in comparison to our 300,000 leak extent, theirs is 360,000. The story here is that we are so much smaller, but mile for mile or resident per resident, we're in much worse shape than Boston. I've also put up Watertown, Waltham, and Brookline, which is smaller than Newton, but you can see significantly less leak extent. So we have a real problem in Newton, and it's an opportunity too. So the last three lines, I said, what if we could reduce consistently 15% per quarter? And tasked, I don't know what the right word is, encouraged National Grid to take this challenge on. They did it last year. Why not do it every quarter? Well, if, because the way the numbers work, if you did that every quarter, by the end of this year, we'd be down to 159,000 square feet. And by the end of 2025, we'd be down to 83,000. And now you're getting into a range that's more like Watertown and Waltham and Brookline. So, and I think that, all right, so this statement is a proposal that was approved by Newton No to 350 Mass, by Green Newton, Mothers Out Front, and the Newton's Commission on Energy. There are a lot of whereases. I'm not going to repeat them. Health and safety, kill trees, waste, ratepayer, and taxpayer resources. The money that could go towards funding electrification, decarbonization, and, for example, network geothermal. And the proposal is that National Grid, that our city lean on National Grid, as the mayor did a year ago, to consistently target leaks. And we're suggesting 20 large leaks a quarter, and then report the results. Now we can track the results, through our database, but that there would be a responsibility and a feedback and responsibility to watch it, transparency and responsibility. Okay, that's my presentation. Glad to answer any questions or join the discussion.
And maybe at the conclusion of the questions on this topic, you can just tell us a word or two about the grant that you got from HEAT on your, that Green Newton has from HEAT.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot that. I will do that.
That's okay. I think Mr. Yo, I think you're first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Peter and the entire team. Sounds like quite the range of folks worked on this. It's absolutely amazing. And we all thank you very much, and we all shared the exact same goals. Vicky, thank you for your questions too about those of us who are already on air source heat pumps and how we might transition. It was exactly what was going through my head. Regarding Peter's presentation, we met last week or 2 weeks ago, I think, with the mayor and Commissioner McGonigal, and really sort of discussed a lot of these issues in detail with the big team. And the mayor certainly agreed again to lean on National Grid to press for the larger leaks to be fixed at a more rapid pace. Certainly, it's gone up and down. I think Commissioner McGonigal thought that there may also have been some weather issues and other kinds of sort of issues that may have led to some of the changes in their ability to get things done. But nonetheless, we need to keep leaning on them to fix these largest leaks, no doubt. So we will continue to work with the team. And thank you again, this website and all of your work is incredibly helpful to all of us who care about this. And I saw several of those dots on your map. I called them in because when I walk around at night and smell, unfortunately, I have a good sniffer, so I smell these things. So, but thank you.
Ms. Berwick.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. This is really awesome work. So I have a question as to, and a suggestion actually. Have you shared any of this with the DPU?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so here's my thinking. I have a lot of confidence in this new DPU. But at the same time, I know they are really overwhelmed with a lot of stuff, interconnection issues, municipal aggregation. They've got a ton on their plate. So I would love for you to share this with them, but I think it's a lot to give to them. And I wonder if would it be possible for you to write a 1 or 2 pager that somehow summarizes the most important, what you think are the most important points, and communicate to the DPU? I mean, this is really, really impressive work.
Thank you. I am working on something to document what I think are violations by National Grid of their requirement.
That would be so great for the DPU to know.
Yes, and I'm working, I want to really nail cross every I and T and
Yeah,
get it
sure.
right. But if you can help us get in front of them, I've signed up to testify at their roadshow in Salem at the end of May. But if we can accelerate that and get that in front of them sooner, I would love to do that.
Okay, well, let's talk.
And I'd like to talk to you about what you think the key points for them would be, and I'd be happy to write something up.
Well, as you were presenting, I was thinking exactly of that. And it seemed to me the key points had to do with what actually constitute violations on National Grid's part of requirements.
Yeah.
Because that's where the DPU has a handle.
Yes. That's right.
I did have a conversation. I was looking to try and get someone from DPU to come speak with us. And in the end of the day, they said, no, they're not coming. But I did hear that I think what I heard was that there are 47 violations that they're chasing after National Grid for right here in Newton, that they feel are violations. So your database could be useful for them.
Yeah, definitely could be useful to them. Yeah, we'll talk. We should talk, Peter.
Great. Thank you, Ann.
Councillor Danberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, thank you very much, Peter, for this incredible piece of work that you all have done. I'm very impressed at the level of detail that you've been able to get into, and where these leaks are, what the extent of the leak is, how many feet out it goes. Just incredible. My question is in regards to the towns of Brookline, Waltham, I think you said, and Watertown, and how much lower they are in danger and extent of leaks that they have. Can any of you, Peter or Anne or anyone else, shed some light on what they have done or what they might have done to get their leaks down to that point? And is this something that Newton can aspire to?
I think that they started at a lower number, that they never had the extent that we have had in Newton.
And the
but-
reason for that, Peter, is that our pipes are older or some other reason? Why would they have started at a lower number? Just, I mean, let's say they've got 1/3 the number of streets that we've got, or whatever that number is. If all things equal, do they still have a lower number than we do per street, with the same number of streets, let's say?
Yeah, I understand your question. I haven't done that test. I don't know. Anne, you look like you're nodding that you've got something to add.
I mean, I don't really know either. My guess would be exactly what Peter said. They started with a lower number, but why that is, I don't know. I doubt that I seriously doubt they have been more effective in getting National Grid to act or the DPU to pay attention.
Okay, so it's really a question that we don't have an answer to. Would be interesting to find out a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
And if there is something that they've done that we can also do, or are their pipes just newer than ours?
Now, I'm in touch with activists in all of those areas, and I'm quite sure they haven't done any more than we have.
I would second that.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Peter, this is fantastic, and I did get a sneak peek, and I was so blown away by your work. And it's so important for decision makers to hear more about it. And I was following up on the idea of having the DPU look at it, which I think is very important, but also our legislatures. There's some kind of special commission. And I love your idea of a commissioner of gas system retirement. That would be involved in our transition, obviously, to getting off fossil fuels and working on heat pumps as well. So I just wanted to throw that out. And then I just wanted you to comment, because we've had this discussion before about the fixing targeted leaks versus wholesale pipe replacement, which I've heard you say and other advocates talk about. Targeted leaks are a much more cost-effective way to address the leaks that we need to address, but at the same time, we're not spending all this money on wholesale pipe replacement that we don't intend to use in the next 30 years. So I wonder if you could comment on that too.
Sure. We did a study of what National Grid spent in Newton in 2022. And round numbers, they spent about $24 million on gas pipes and leaks in 2022. Of that, 95% was on replacing gas pipe. And all of $125,000 was spent on fixing large gas leaks. And they reduced gas leaks by more by fixing the leaks than they did the $23 million on replacing the pipes. I hope I said that clearly enough.
What I was hearing when I was chairing this committee last year was National Grid would insist that it was more effective to do wholesale replacement on gas leaks rather than.
Well, I wish they could show the numbers for that, because our data shows that it goes entirely the other way.
So is it true that the federal government pays most of the money for the replacement of these pipes?
No.
No.
Customers pay, yes, and in the future too.
So
the pipes will be paid off over the next.
okay, so
30
there's
to
no
50
federal or state reimbursement for doing this work?
There is some PHMSA, pipeline hazardous material, safety material administration grants available for replacing pipes, but I don't know if National Grid.
This is ratepayer money.
It's ratepayer
Yeah,
money.
it's all ratepayer
Okay.
money here. There is some grants, but nationally available, but I don't know of any being in Massachusetts.
Okay. I think it was someone from the Feeney Brothers that told me that, so.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Counselor Getz.
Thank you, Peter, for this work. It's pretty incredible. You know, it's just really nice to see all of this data coalesced. I mean, is this you just even identifying where the leaks are? Is this just simply, you know, like it was mentioned, you know, that it's simply, you know, people identify, they walk by and they smell something, so that then that's identified as a site where there is a leak? I mean, is there routine, like, you know, a truck or something that can monitor and goes down all the streets in Newton and then identifies the leak sites? How does that system even work?
I know that people call them in, but I see Audrey nodding. Maybe you can fill that in better.
Yeah, there's by law, and Anne would know this, you know, would be able to talk about this also, but by law, they have to do surveys, both mobile surveys by car as well as walking surveys every few years. So as well as customers calling in. And that's how they find out, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of just the rank order of the repairs, is it who makes those decisions? Is it simply, you know, the one that's the highest extent area? Is it on them in terms of which ones they decide to fix? How does that system work?
Go ahead, Audrey.
Okay, first it's by safety. So if there's something that's potentially explosive, of course, that gets repaired first. Then it's stuff that might become explosive is repaired second. And then after that comes the SEIs, the significant environmental impact leaks. And then after that are all the other leaks that are repaired as they can get to them.
Okay, and then finally, my last question is, I've heard this, and I don't know, have you heard this? Or if they fix the leak in one place, it could potentially then generate or create a leak further downstream. Is that something that occurs, you know, just in terms of a pipe being at an age or faulty, that it just simply moves downstream?
Yes, that can happen. Yep, that's right.
Well,
if I may, the leak that the pipes that were replaced that Peter showed us on the map, the Commonwealth Avenue, Whittier, all of those where they took 3 years to get them done. There's now a leak right next to the pipe that was replaced on Beaumont. That wasn't there before and that's there now.
Okay.
You all set, Councilor Getz?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Berwick?
Yeah, I mean, the reason for the original GSEP order, which was on my watch, now I'm sad to say, but, you know, it was 10 years ago, and the theory was, well, it's just whack-a-mole. You know, if we repair a leak, then we'll get one down the street, or it makes much more sense to replace pipes. You know, now we know that was not the best strategy. Or some combination of leak repair and pipe replacement probably was the best strategy. But we're putting in place, as we all know, all this infrastructure that we should be phasing out. So it's not a pretty picture. But the theory was, yeah, that they just pop up. I mean, I had a guy on my corner, and I said, how long are you gonna be here fixing this leak? And he said, I don't know, lady, but when we fix this one, there'll be another one down the street. So, you know, that was the theory.
Yeah. Peter, I don't see any more questions. You want to just quickly summarize your grant from the Green Newton grant?
Sure. So I'm part of the team at Green Newton, which has received a small grant from HEAT to investigate possible locations for network geothermal in Newton. And the city is, you know, we've discussed this with Bill, I think I see Bill in the room there. And city is very supportive, but it has been very clear that they don't want to, and Green Newton likes the idea because it gives us a chance to talk to Newton residents about gas, about network geothermal, about electrification. And part of our Green Newton's, strategy of educating the public in Newton about what needs to be done. So we're very excited. But the city's been clear they don't want to raise hopes among residents that there'll be a network geothermal down the street next year. And so our first task is to demonstrate that there is a legal route to go in that direction. That came up earlier in this discussion. I think the gas company is a natural operator. They'll tell you that they're not authorized to do that yet. And so we are been talking to potential operators to find one to stand up and say, yes, we'll go into this business. That's where we stand. We'd love to get out into the city and talk to people about it. We really can't do it yet until we've satisfied that need.
Okay, well, thank you. And I think this would be the time when we're gonna just vote on probably to hold some of these items, so thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. Lovely seeing you all.
Thanks. So we have two items that we've just discussed. I know, Mr. Klimoff, I think you wanted to ask a question, but I think if you could just send your question in through the clerk's office, we'll try and get it directed to the right person to get your answer. So the items are 148-24, which is, that was your presentation, Peter. What is your pleasure? Do you wanna NA on that one, or?
I think I'd like to hold it.
You wanna hold that
Yeah.
one? And also 39-24, we definitely need to hold that one, because that one we haven't operationalized at all. So, yes, you wanna move to hold
I'll
both
move
of
to
them?
hold both, 148/24 and 39/24. Motion to hold.
So, any other comments before we close off for the night? Okay, all those in favor to hold both of these items, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? And no abstentions? All right, so I think we're all set. And Peter, thank you very
Aye.
much. That's great.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.